What's going on, you guys, and welcome to another video. In today's video, we're going to cover a topic that has been a highly requested question, which is how do I start running if I'm not a runner? We're going to break this video up into 5 different categories. We're first going to talk a little bit about programming. We'll then jump into conditioning and stamina. We'll jump into durability, some of the things that people don't think about. We'll cover shoes, and then we'll finish things off with hydration. Before jumping into each category, if you haven't already, if you could like and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. It helps me more than you know. Okay, so let's jump into category number 1, which is programming. And let's use the example of someone that's never ran or maybe just trying to run their first mile. Totally okay. One of the common mistakes that I see a lot of people go through is they go out and try to run too fast, too long, or try to cover a distance that just isn't too feasible. And I get it. The ambition is there, the motivation is there. I've been there. I've done it many times where I think I'm capable of covering a certain distance, especially like in the mountains, and my body simply wasn't prepared for that. And that led to a couple of issues, which we'll talk about in this video as well. And so some of the factors that I think about are like speed, distance, or time. And what I'd like for you to think about is taking a systematic approach to either running a certain amount of distance, in this example, the 1 mile, or a certain amount of time, let's just say 10 to 20 minutes. I don't want to consider speed this early in the game, especially for a beginner runner. Speed will come over time. And I know how easy it is to think about wanting to go fast because that's all the super sexy stuff that we see on social media. I get it. But if we think long term, speed will come over time. So for the purpose of this video, let's focus just on distance and duration, time. And I'm going to give you 2 different examples of how to take a systematic approach. The first one is, let's say you don't have a running watch, like this one here. I have a Garmin. Let's say we don't have a watch that can track our distance that we're covering. In this example, we'll use time as our factor. So one of the things you can do when learning to run your first mile or trying to run 10 minutes, I always tell folks to start with a 1-minute run at a base pace. And we'll talk a little bit more about speeds in section number 2. So you would want to do 1 minute of base running followed by 1 minute of walking. This way you're giving yourself some time under strain, but also some time under recovery. You would follow that same process for 10 rounds, totaling to 20 minutes total. 10 of those minutes were covering in running, and 10 of those minutes were covered in walking. Well, let's say that 1 minute is too much. That's totally okay. You can cut that in half. You could say that I'm going to do 30 seconds of that base running, followed by 30 seconds of walking. We could repeat that for 20 rounds, getting the total amount of time that we got with the 1 minute on, 1 minute off. And as time goes on, you can then increase the amount of time that you're running at that base pace. Let's say the next time you can go up to 90 seconds on, 90 seconds off. We can go up to 120 seconds, so 2 minutes of base running followed by 2 minutes of walking. And over time, we can get ourselves to a place where we're running for 10 minutes total. The second example you could use would be if you do have a watch. So let's say we do have a watch and we want to take distance as the factor that we're using to begin our running. We could start off with running 1/10 of a mile at that base pace, followed by 1/10 of walking. Similar to the distance example, we can then repeat that for 10 rounds, getting us up to 1 mile across those 10 rounds. As we progress as a runner, we can then increase that distance up to 2/10 of a mile, followed by 2/10 of a walk. Repeating that for 5 rounds, that gets us up to 1 mile of base running, 1 mile of walking. Another thing that you can do to play around with the numbers is, let's say you want to increase the distance that you're running, but then we want to also decrease the amount of rest that we're taking. Let's say we get to 2/10 of a mile for base running, and we follow that up with just 1/10 of walking. And then we can repeat that same cycle. So we're running more and we're walking less. And eventually we get to that place similar to the distance where we're running for the full distance that we're looking to cover. And this is a nice segue into section number 2, which is around conditioning. So I use the base pace in the example. So why base pace? What is base pace? Before jumping into the different paces here, I want to talk a little bit around why base pace is so important. The key in the early stages in building your running is around the foundation, also known as your aerobic base. This is going to help you with your stamina, your heart health, your ability to sustain that duration while you're running and not feeling like your heart is going to explode. The second piece to it that's really important around this base building phase is going to be around developing that soft tissue within your body. So I'm talking your ligaments, your tendons. We want to be keeping our intensity levels low. If we find ourselves going too hard too soon, some of the things that are going to happen is we're going to increase the risk of our injury. We're not going to be able to complete our workouts and not feel motivated to do the next one because we already think, oh, I gave it a try and it didn't work out. Hear it all the time. And again, going back, the key here is to build your aerobic base. That's going to help us lead to get to a place where we can do the sexy stuff like the sprint sprinting, the power hill runs, stuff like that. But we can't get there unless we build a foundation that allows us to do that in a safe manner. But let's talk a little bit more about the different paces. So for the examples that we use, right, we want to run 1 mile, or maybe we would just want to run 10 minutes. In these early stages, I always tell folks to just stay within that base pace. So what is base pace? Easiest way to figure out what is base pace is if you're able to have a conversation while in your base pace, like I'm talking to the camera here, that's okay. The next level up from a speed perspective would be your race pace. So race pace, the good way to gauge it is you're able to speak, but not in full sentences. And then your final level from a speed perspective will be your sprint. Unable to say any words, hard to breathe. So again, base, race, sprint. Base, you can have a conversation. Race, just a couple of words. Sprint, not able to talk, very short burst. And I'm in the camp of developing that slow running early to build the conditioning in the heart and the soft tissue and the efficiency. And over time, you will be able to run fast while keeping a low intensity from a heart perspective. Jumping into section number 3, which is around durability. So I think of 2 things here, training and recovery. Let's talk training first because that's 3 sections by itself. Number 1, we have to develop our muscles, right? So when we think of running, we think of our legs too. One of the things that a lot of people overlook when thinking about running is the benefit of strength training and how it helps provide symmetry across the body. In last week's video, we talked a little bit about looking at the body as a full holistic system versus these individual components. And I feel like a lot of early runners will just go into running and just ignore everything else. The second part of the strength training piece is that it also helps develop the synergistic muscles. So these are the muscles that help support the antagonist muscles. So in this example, think of like your calves doing the running, but we also want to be developing the anterior tibialis, which is the muscle in front of the calves. We want to be developing the adductors, the abductors, the quads, the hamstrings, the glute medius, the glute maximus. These are all muscles that work together. So then when that calf does get tight from running too long, those other muscles can come in and do what it needs to do. Not saying that that's where we want to be, but we want to have that foundation. Again, thinking about the foundation is key here early when beginning our running journey. The second piece to training here is around bone density, and that's going to come again from that strength training piece. So one of the comments that I made in last week's video again is about there's a big misconception around these runners that have these frail bodies, and it's because they simply don't do the strength training to build that bone density. This is also going to help reduce the risk of injury, and one of the things that you see a lot with runners are fractured bones, which are small cracks within the bone, and it's very painful, and then it leads to you not running. And then when they finally get healthy, they decide, I don't want to get back to running because I always end up getting hurt. By adding strength training to your programming, this helps reduce the risk of those types of injuries. And then the third part to training here is around the soft tissue. So again, we think about the ligaments, the tendons. One of the ones that come up a ton when it comes to running is the Achilles tendon. And some of the things that you can do are like plyometric work, explosiveness, like box jumps. And this is where the importance of programming comes into play, because it's not just doing a ton of plyometrics to help develop the body. You want to make sure that you're managing your intensity loads, because you want to have a little, but you can definitely have too much, which would then lead to an injury. And the second piece of the durability part is around time. So letting the body recover. So one of the equations that I always think about is training plus recovery time equals performance. You can't get performance with just one of the components. You need to give yourself time when you're straining and also recovering. Think long term, and we talked about building that aerobic base, because over time, we're going to be able to build not just our conditioning, but our durability within our body. Pivoting away from the training and the conditioning piece of everything, jumping into section number 4, which is around shoes. Now, one of the things that are really popular right now in the fitness industry are these minimalist shoes, which I do have and I do use, but for specific activities. I don't use those minimalist shoes for running, and the reason why is because we simply aren't built to be running on cement. There are people on social media that will tell you that you can, and the reality is that for an early beginner runner, you do not want to be using those types of shoes. It's only a matter of time where something could lead to Achilles tendonitis or a ruptured Achilles, and then you're out for 6 to 9 months, have to get surgery, and it's a complete mess. I always tell folks in the early stages of their running career that they want to have something that has a heel drop, but also some cushioning to support and protect you from the cement. For me, I'm a big advocate of the New Balance 1080 Fresh Foam. I've been using them for roughly 2 years now, and one of the things that I do love about them is that they do give enough cushioning to support my feet when running on cement, but not so much that I feel a disconnection from the ground. The second piece that I like about this, and this is another component when thinking about the shoes, is that you really want to focus on the fit, making sure that something fits your foot correctly and not just going off of style or color. If you're someone interested in trail or mountain shoes, the shoes that I use from a trail perspective are the VJ Shoes Ultra 2s. Been using them for over 3 years now. Those do include a rock plate that protect you from the sharp rocks and give you just enough support to ensure that you have a connection with the ground. And then for our final section around hydration, I'm going to keep on that same example of either we're going to be focusing on running 1 mile or running for 10 minutes. I'm not too concerned about you hydrating throughout this period of a workout because it is so short, but I'm more concerned about what you're doing before and after this training session. At a bare minimum, I always tell folks to be drinking a minimum of half of your body weight in ounces. So let's say, for example, you're a 150-pound athlete, you want to be drinking at least 75 ounces of water on a daily basis. And that would be the minimum. If you want to get to good, think about 75%. And then best case scenario, let's try to get at least 100% of your body weight in ounces. So in this example, it would be 150 ounces. The second piece to this would be around electrolytes, which are the 3 components of magnesium, potassium, and sodium. The best way that I heard about how electrolytes are beneficial to athletes is think about an airplane flying in the sky. It doesn't have a captain, but it's just flying in the sky and it's going wherever the wind takes it. No problem. Now, if we were to add a pilot to that airplane, or in this instance, adding electrolytes to our water, this pilot is telling that airplane where to go. And in this example, as a runner, the electrolytes are telling the water that we need to go to those activated muscles to ensure that it's getting not just the hydration, but the nutrients from the electrolytes themselves. From a supplement perspective, I'm a big fan of BPN's electrolytes. I have a link below to the one that I use. I'm a big fan of their watermelon flavor. So be sure to check them out if you are interested in checking out a new electrolyte. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts around how to start running if you are not a runner. Some of the things that I think about as final thoughts is think long term. You can run slow to run fast. Just give it time and eventually you'll be picking up those paces while maintaining a very low heart rate. And always be mindful of those intensity loads because we want to ensure that we're building a foundation early, especially within those soft tissues of your ligaments and tendons. If you have any questions or concerns, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. I appreciate you watching and we'll catch you in the next one.